Hello everyone, so today's going to be the very first episode of my Escape from Tarkov Standard Edition playthrough. Now this is heavily inspired by Pestily, who's an awesome Tarkov streamer. I watch all of his videos. If you have not seen his content, I'll leave links in the description down below. But anyways guys, the whole idea behind this playthrough is to teach you and show you how I play Escape from Tarkov, because I know whenever I upload a Tarkov video, a ton of you guys ask like, I don't know how to play this game, it's so daunting, or I don't even know what Tarkov is about. Hopefully this video will teach you, and this series will teach you how to play Tarkov, what Tarkov is, and if it's a game that you want to play. So jumping straight into it, we're going to be talking about the first things you're going to do before you even get into a raid. So this is going to be a complete explanation of everything a beginner needs to know before you jump into your first raid. So today's video is going to be talking about setting up your character, talking about the medical system, the ammo types, beginner weapons, how to gear, how to use certain hotkeys, and stuff like that. First thing you're going to see when you install and download Escape from Tarkov after you make your name is this screen. This is going to be picking your character. Now there's bears, USECs. The only difference between the two are primarily cosmetic. Both teams have different camo sets. The bears speak Russian and the USECs speak English. I'm a USEC on my primary account, so I'll pick a bear this playthrough. So we're going to pick a bear. That's pretty much the only difference, is just cosmetic. There's no advantages to playing one or the other, so it comes down to personal preference at that point. So this is the main menu for Escape from Tarkov. The first thing I'm going to do is go through and check to make sure my settings are what I want them to be. This should be the same settings I use on my primary account, so if you wanted to know what kind of Escape from Tarkov settings I use these settings. These settings are also, I believe, the same settings that Pestily uses. Once again, he's been a huge inspiration for me, a huge learning assist for me as well. I have a whole bunch of custom keybinds here, so I'll just slowly come down the list. But just a heads up that the default key bindings here are pretty much good. You can tweak them as you play and as you learn what you want to use and where you want to use it. But this is what I use right here. You can slow down the video and pause it as need be. The only suggestion I have for new players, the only keybind I would say, is adding a discard from delete, change it to you, and I'll actually do that right here as well. This is a Pestily trick. Basically, when you go into your inventory and you want to delete stuff, I'll explain how that works, but it basically speeds stuff up. So that's all we're going to do there, and we're going to jump into the character screen, and I'm going to explain every single tab here, what you want to do with your inventory, and just all the systems in Tarkov. So let's jump straight into it. So the first thing that we're looking at here is the character screen, your rigs and backpacks, and then your stash. So the left kind of side here, this is everything that you're wearing. This of course is also stuff that you're wearing, and then you have your stash, which is like your bank out of raids. So starting with your character, earpieces essentially augment the sound that's in Escape from Tarkov. You can get Comtacs, you can get Swordins, you can get Tac Sports, a whole bunch of different earpieces. As a beginner, I would not recommend playing with ears yet. I would just focus on using normal sound and just listening and learning the sounds without a headset. Later on in the game, especially when you can afford it, you can start tooling around with which headset you enjoy and which one you think makes you better. But there's no definitive best headset. Each earpiece sounds differently and will affect sound differently. It all comes down to personal preference. Moving on from that, we have headwear. This is anything like hats and, for the most of the time, helmets and stuff, protective gear on your head. Certain things can be worn with earpieces and some things can't. One thing to know about helmets is that they also decrease the sound. That's how realistic the sound is in Escape from Tarkov. When you put something on your head and it covers your ears, it will decrease that sound that you hear. Certain helmets do have cutouts for the ears, then they won't affect your hearing, and there's a whole bunch of different combinations. So a lot of different helmets, and as we play, we'll be explaining what each one does. Face covers and eyewear are mostly cosmetic. They're just things that go on your face. One small advantage to note about the face cover, however, is that it will kind of decrease the amount of light reflecting off of your pale face, because in game, when you're hiding in a bush and you have this big white thing sticking out of a bush, it is kind of easy to see. So that is a small advantage to having some sort of face cover, a balaclava, a mask, so on and so forth. Eyewear pretty much has no use in the game right now as far as I can tell. Body armor, that's going to be your rated armor to stop certain rounds. There's everything from level 2 class armor all the way up to class 6. And each different class of armor will stop certain rounds and certain penetration from hitting your chest. Now, different armors can defend different parts of your body. You can have armors that defend your thorax and your stomach and your arms. Some defend just the thorax and some protect just your thorax and stomach. backpack. So there's a whole bunch of combinations there as well. You are able to carry 2 weapons in Tarkov, a primary and secondary. Both these slots, your primary, of course, is going to be the one that's up in your hands, and then you have on your back. You can hold 1 secondary or pistol, and then of course you have tactical rig, pockets, and backpack slots. So as you can see here, you'll put on tactical rigs. Tactical rigs can come armored as well. It's important to note that you cannot wear body armor and a tactical rig that has armor at the same time. This one does not have body armor on. This is just a normal tactical rig. But if you do end up seeing a rig with armor, you can't double up on armor. That's just not possible in the game. Pockets are just always on your character. You will always have these 4 slots no matter where you are, and they're easily accessible. And then you have backpacks, which are mainly for your storage. Note the difference between tactical rig storage slots, pockets, and the backpack is that usable items are in your pockets and tactical rig. You cannot reload. For example, if we had this magazine in our backpack, if we clicked R to reload our primary, we would not be able to reload. The weapon magazines have to be inside your rig. Some guns will load using individual rounds. For example, if we took the rounds out, like the Mosin, for example, you would have to have loose rounds like this. Not the AKS, but if you had a Mosin, you would have loose rounds here, and then you would load from your pockets. You could not put the loose rounds in your backpack. So that's the main differences between storage space in your rig and on your person. That's pretty much everything you need to know about your character. I almost forgot one of the most important parts, the pouch. The pouch is very important because as a PMC character, when you go in, not a Scav, Scavs don't have pouches, but as a PMC, you'll have an area for your pouch. Now, depending on what version of Escape from Tarkov you have, the pouch will differ in size. Now, what the alpha container does, or any container in general, is that it will allow you to keep certain items even after you die. In Escape from Tarkov, let's say we took the AKS and the MBSS into a raid and died, these items would be removed. We would totally lose these items. However, if we put certain items in our alpha container, if we died, we would keep these items out of raid. So the alpha container is a way for you to put high value items or loot or quest items in your alpha container to keep them and take them out of raid even if you die. Because in Escape from Tarkov, the only way you can really take out stuff is if you survive the raid and extract. You lose everything else when you die. Now, moving on to the health. Now, this is something that's kind of in depth, and I know we're going through a ton of information here, so just bear with me. I love the health system in Escape from Tarkov. Escape from Tarkov has different limb values. For example, you have head, thorax, your arms, your stomach, and your legs. Now, we're going to talk about different damage types and how to address them and what happens to certain limbs when they become zeroed or blacked. So, if your health on your head, which is currently 35 out of 35, ever hit 0, or your thorax ever hits 0 out of 80 via bullet damage, you are instantly killed. So your head and your thorax are very important parts of your body. You always want to make sure they're healed. That's what happens if you lose those body parts. As far as your stomach, if your stomach ever gets shot to where it's zeroed out, you will begin losing water and energy. If your water goes down to 0, you'll dehydrate, which essentially means every part of your body will take equal points of damage until you die. You can continually heal yourself, but it's a pain in the ass. Energy, however, when you run to 0, you'll look very tired. It'll mess with your FOV. You'll start blinking. It's a huge hindrance as far as visually speaking. Now, there's a couple ways you can recover black limbs, which are kind of mid-tier items, which are like the CMS kit or surgery kits. Those will let you repair, but we're not going to worry about those right now. Now, as far as your arms, when your arms are at 0 out of 60, you'll start shaking more. It's harder to hold your weapon, and it becomes much harder to aim. Your legs, when they're blacked, you will no longer have a normal walking speed. You'll begin limping, you can't sprint, and it becomes very difficult to maneuver. So let's talk about what happens when you get shot. When you get shot, you most of the time end up bleeding. The main way to address bleeding is with a bandage. Bandages stop bleeding. That's how you are able to cease a wound from continuing to lose health. Now, note, if you lose your left arm and it's still bleeding, even if it's 0 out of 60, the rest of your body will start taking equal points of damage. It's very important to stop bleeding the second it happens to avoid losing additional health. Now, to regain health, let's say we took a shot into the left arm, we stopped the bleeding, and our arm was a little damaged now, let's say 30 out of 60. How we would address and repair that or heal that is using an AI2 medkit. Now, you can use AI2 medkits by putting them in your pockets and hotkeying them and clicking clicking use all or dropping them specifically onto the limb. Now, I hotkey my meds like this Essentially, you would take the item, put it in your pocket, and then you can hotkey certain items in your pockets and rigs by just hovering over the item and clicking 4 or 5, whatever button you want. We're just going to take this out for now. That was just for show. As far as splints, now what splints do is they'll fix fractures. Fractures happen occasionally when you take damage. It'll happen if you jump off a very high roof and you break your legs or you fracture your legs. Your legs will lose some health, but they'll also be fractured. And in that case, you would use a splint to address that. Getting a fractured limb essentially gives it a blacked out effect to where it's either very shaky or you can't run, and you need to address it with a splint. Now, another important med are painkillers. Painkillers will essentially numb the effects of a blacked out limb. So let's say your right and left arm were blacked and you have really shaky arms. If you take a painkiller, these limbs will still be 0 out of 60, but you will still have stable aiming. You'll still be able to aim straight. Same thing with left and right legs. If you had a black leg and you could not walk, if you took a painkiller, you would then regain your walking speed and your ability to sprint. However, sprinting on a blacked out leg will cause equal points of damage to your entire body. So it does allow you that movement back, but at a certain cost. I think I'm missing something else when it comes to health. Oh yes, blacking out limbs. When you black out a limb, let's say you've been repeatedly shot in the arm, your right arm is now 0 out of 60 and it's blacked. Every additional point of damage that you take to that zeroed out arm will cause equal points of damage to the entire body. This is why people say in Tarkov there's a leg meta or arm meta, is that when you see a really geared player that is running armor that's protecting the thorax, stomach, and a big helmet that's protecting their head, and you have a very low caliber gun like a 9mm weapon that will not be able to penetrate either of these armors, you will shoot them repeatedly in the legs or the arms because it will zero out the arms, zero out the legs, and then you'll cause consistent points of damage across the whole body without having to try to defeat or penetrate the body armor. So it's important to kind of understand that. I know this is a ton of information, but we're trying to cover everything in a fast, concise manner. So I think that's everything I want to talk about the health screen for right now. One last thing is that you can see your total health here, 435 out of 435. This is just your total health, and it's a fast way to see how hurt you are. For example, if you're at 200, you know you're roughly around half health. Okay, moving on to skills. This is kind of the RPG aspect to Escape from Tarkov. You have the ability to level up certain skills, and each skill leveled up will improve certain abilities. For example, strength. If you improve your strength, you'll be able to throw further, jump higher, stuff like that. And each skill here has got a ton of cool perks. You can go through and look through each individual skill on your own time. For the most part, you don't need to worry about specifically leveling these or figuring them out in the beginning. Later on, when we do hit certain quests, I will explain how to level up certain skills. But for right now, just note that they're there, and you can take a look at them on your own. And eventually, throughout the playthrough, they'll become more and more relevant. Map, we're not going to worry about that. I mainly use out-of-raid maps or out-of-game maps. These are third-party maps made by the community. There's a ton of awesome ones. The Escape from Tarkov wiki is going to be the go-to place for anything like external or guides on quests, everything like that. The wiki on Escape from Tarkov is fantastic. Like RPGs, there are tasks in Escape from Tarkov. Tasks are like quests that give you XP, they give you rewards, and they help you level up your traders, which we'll talk about next. So let's talk about traders, okay? There are individual traders within Escape from Tarkov. Each trader sells and buys certain items. Prepper is going to be primarily your AK stuff and Russian stuff. Therapist is going to be your meds and certain items like that. Fence buys and sells whatever players sell and buy to him. So it's kind of a player-run thing, but he sells for really high and he buys for really low. So the only time I really ever use Fence is when none of the other traders will buy what I'm trying to sell them. Skier sells weapon parts as well as other AKM and AKs and stuff like that. He's just kind of a mixed bag. Peacekeeper sells NATO weapons, so that's where you're going to find your MP5s, your M9s, your M4s eventually. Mechanic sells NATO attachments, and Ragman sells clothing and armor and stuff like that. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go through each trader and do all the examining. Examining in Escape from Tarkov is really important because you need to, every time you find a new item, you need to examine it before you loot it, before you drag it, before you equip it. So looting and examining in the field when you're trying to get out there and get stuff quick can actually slow you down quite a bit. That's why when you're out of raid, you want to make sure you examine it as much as possible from the traders. This is one of the reasons that Fence is kind of useful, because of all the items that players sell to him. You can examine almost every item in the game from Fence, and I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. But examining items is incredibly important because when you're out in the field and you find an unknown item, you don't want to be sitting in the open trying to figure out what it is and taking these couple seconds to examine it. You want to make sure you have that all done as much as possible before you get into a raid. There's only one exception to this, and that's keys, and we'll talk about that when we get to Fence. Alright, so we've examined everything from Prapor. There's two ways you can acquire things from traders. Number one is buying it with rubles. I recommend just clicking fill items so it automatically adds your money here, and then you can just change your quantity here, and you can make a deal here. This is with rubles, or you can trade items. Certain items in the game, you can trade to the traders for whatever they're selling. So you'll notice that because it says the ruble icon up here, or a trade, barter trade up here on the top left. Now, at the top right, you're going to notice that there is a certain level of attitude and loyalty levels to traders. Each trader has 4 loyalty levels. At each level that you upgrade, you unlock more things that you're able to buy. That's how, as you progress in Escape from Tarkov, you get access to more endgame stuff and better equipment. Now, currently, we're at level 1 out of Prapor's loyalty levels, and to reach the next loyalty level we have to reach a character level of 15, a trader reputation of 0.2, and we had to have spent or bought at least spent or sold at least 1 million rubles to Prapor. So that's a lot of stuff to take in, I know, but the way you would level Prapor is by earning experience in raids and surviving and killing people and doing quests, and by completing quests to increase the trader rep, and then of course by buying and selling to him to increase the amount of money spent. So we'll go to tasks now. This is a very important part of Tarkov because this is how you unlock more trader rep and upgrade your loyalty level. The first thing you're going to want to do is click show locked. This will show all the locked quests or the next locked quest so that you know what you need to do to unlock that quest. And that'll make more sense as we get to, I think, Skier. So we're going to accept this first task. And our first quest is debut from Prapor. We have to kill 5 scavs on the customs map and find 2 MP133 shotguns and hand them over to him. Now you'll see those are the objectives, and these are our awards or rewards. We'll get 600 XP, we'll get 0.08 trader rep with Prapor. We need a total of 0.2 once again to level him, and we'll get a PM pistol, a couple mags, some money, and the ability to buy AKS-74Us from Prapor. That's what this little lock icon means, is that you can now buy this from Prapor. So we'll do this to every trader, and I'll kind of speed it up just so that we don't waste too much time here. One thing that you'll note is that each trader will buy and sell different items, so it's not like every trader is equal. And we'll talk about what you should sell to who and in what order. So, like I said before, painkillers are a very important med. They're going to let you run when you black out your leg, or they'll pretty much nullify the negative effects of a blackout limb. So we're going to buy, I'd say, 5 of these to start. You'll also notice that she sells bandages when you need them, AI2 med kits, a car first aid kit, which is essentially a bandage and a med kit together, and eventually a Salewa. So there's multiple different levels of meds. Each do their own thing. You can kind of read what they all do here. So for example, you'll see that this car kit will stop blood loss. It takes 3 seconds to use, and it has a total usage of 220. Whereas the AI2 does not stop blood loss, and only has a total HP use of 100 out of 100. So the car kit is a direct upgrade. It stops blood loss, so you don't have to carry around a bandage and an AI2 anymore. You just carry around the car kit. And each item, medical item, will do certain things differently. So very important to keep note of these things. And as always, reading the text down below will teach you more about what it does. We're going to go to tasks. We're going to make sure the show locked is ticked. We're going to accept the second quest we're going to do, which is shortage. We have to find 5 Salewa kits in raid. Now, Salewa kits, she actually sells. Actually, we don't have to find them in raid. We just need 5 Salewa kits. So there's 2 different ways that quests will work when it requires items. They'll either have to be found in raid, which means you have to go into a raid and find them, or you can just give them to her. It'll say in raid or just say find. The difference between both is that if it just says find, you can just buy these or have a friend drop you them, or buy them on the flea market and give them. Whereas in raid, you have to go into an actual instance in game, survive, extract with it, and bring it out. And I'll show you what that means and what that icon looks like as we play the game. So these are what Salewas look like. Technically, if we wanted to, and if we could find 5 Paids and trade these for 5 Salewas to complete the quest, but most likely we're going to be finding the Salewas in raid or buying them off the flea market once we hit level 5. Moving on to Fence. Okay, so Fence is great, like I said before, not really for anything other than buying ruined armor or selling ruined armor to, or and examining items that you don't have. The one thing that you want to note with examining items, and the only item you don't want to examine, in my opinion, this is my little tip, are keys. You don't want to examine keys until you've taken them out of the raid. This will allow you to keep track of what keys you have and which keys you don't have. If you don't know what keys do, they're just like in real life. They'll unlock locked doors, and most keys in the game, you can use them as many times as possible. There are a few keys that have durability, and every key with durability is worth taking. It's just that you want to make sure that you keep track of which keys you have and which keys you don't have. So if I find a key in the raid, I won't examine it until I've survived, extracted, and brought it into my stash. At that point, I know I have secured the key, and I can examine the key. Because the last thing you want to do is examine a key in a raid, die, and then lose the key, and then run across that key like later, and think that you have it and not pick it up. So that's just my personal opinion on what to do with keys. Now, personally, I would highly advise you to continually refresh Fence and examine everything he has. That way, when you're in raid, you aren't struggling with examining things during a firefight or out in the open when you have no cover looting. One other thing that I would recommend doing is, or why I recommend doing this, is because at the bottom right, you can see this gives you some XP. You're actually getting some passive XP out of the raid by examining these items. So we're going to just do that later on. I'll do that off screen. And we're going to go to Skier, and we're going to look at everything that he's selling as well. Just make sure this is all examined. I'm using the middle mouse button, by the way, to quickly examine these things. That's a hotkey that I highly recommend using, is the middle mouse button. As we can see here in the tasks, we do need to hit level 5, and we can see this lock quest because we've enabled the show locked. And you can see at the top right as well that each trader will have different requirements to reaching the max or the next level. One thing to note as well is that certain tasks, when completed, will decrease another trader's reputation. So it's a constant balance and battle between making sure you have the proper trading rep with the traders. I'll just examine everything off video as well, just because it's not really necessary. We don't have any quests from Peacekeeper or Mechanic right now, but you can see once again, level 10, and we'll unlock Gunsmith Part 1. Ragman we're going to talk about a little bit more so we can go into more depth about armor and equipment. We're going to examine everything here, and the main thing we're going to be talking about here is what your beginner kit should look like in Escape from Tarkov. There are a couple things in Tarkov that you need to know, and that is that armor is almost necessary. A lot of people in Escape from Tarkov think that if they go in with very little gear or nothing, they'll have better odds of coming out with a lot of stuff. And to some extent, that is true. It's low risk and a high chance for reward, right? Because you're not really taking anything into the raid that you will lose because you're going in with just a pistol or no armor. But in Escape from Tarkov, in my personal opinion, the more you bring in, kind of the higher chances you are of surviving. For example, if you bring in an armor, yes, you have a chance to lose that armor, but this armor also has a chance of blocking one-shots from shotguns or 9mm rounds, or being shredded absolutely from scavs. I kind of have a really interesting take on bringing gear into raids, because a lot of players get trapped in that thinking of like rags to riches. But the more you do that, the more you expose yourself, the more vulnerable you are. Higher level players and more experienced players can do it because they know what places to avoid and where to go. But as a new player, the more protection you put on, the higher your chances are of surviving, in my opinion. So we're going to go ahead and inspect this pack of soft armor. This is the level 2 class armor. This is one of the lowest armors that you will be using in Escape from Tarkov, and it is pretty much the bare minimum. I highly recommend using some kind of armor in every raid. The pack is definitely a great beginner armor. It will stop some 9mm rounds. It'll stop buckshot from absolutely wrecking you. When you're starting out and trying to learn the game, pack of armor will keep you from dying from a lot of stupid things. So I highly recommend picking up a pack of soft armor. Now, as far as helmets, the logic behind helmets is that if you get hit in the head in that very specific area that the helmet is covering, the helmet has a chance to ricochet or stop certain rounds, mostly 9mm and certain 5.45 rounds and certain 5.56 rounds. Each bullet each bullet in Tarkov has its own damage and penetration values, and that's something we'll talk about really soon here. But each armor has its own armor class. You'll see this at the armor class when you double click on it, starting from 2 to 3, 4, 5, and up to 6. You can see a whole bunch of different resource and materials about what armor class stops what and what round will go through what. We'll show you the whole ballistics chart later in the video. But for right now, I wouldn't worry about helmets too much. I would only start using helmets once you're a little bit more comfortable with the game and a little bit more confident, because the odds that a helmet will save you are kind of low, because the round has to not penetrate, which means it has to be a specific round that you're blocking, and it needs to not hit you in the face. For example, if you get hit in the face while wearing this helmet, the helmet's not going to help. Certain helmets do have face shields, which will eventually stop 9mm or certain rounds, but in the beginning of the game, you don't have access to those. Also, this level 2 helmet is absolutely useless. Do not ever use level 2 helmets. They're pretty much useless. Level 3 helmets are the lowest level of helmet that you should use, and level 2 body armor is the lowest level of armor. Now, a couple things you'll note when looking at helmets and armor is the armor hit points. This is essentially how much damage that can take. Once this level 2 armor is 0 out of 50 as far as durability, as you can see here, it's 50 out of 50 now. If this ever reaches 0 out of 50, it's essentially useless. Every round is going to go right through it. It's pretty much non-existent. So something to note that's important about this is if you're in a raid, and let's say you're wearing this 50 out of 50 level 2 armor, and you come across a level 6 class armor, but it's 0 out of whatever durability it is, it will offer no protection. So that's just something to note. That's pretty much all I want to talk about armor. You can repair armor as well. Armor repair costs and how much it repairs is going to depend on the material. So certain material will repair much better. For example, this, when it's 0 out of 50, it might repair to 49 out of 49, or bad armors will repair to like 30 out of 30. That depends on what kind of material it's used, so that's just something to keep an eye on. Now, your starter kit is not only going to consist of armor, but you're also going to want something to carry out of raids. The M rig is a fantastic beginner rig. It has a 4 slot as well as 2 2x1s, so we're going to pick up one of those, and we're also going to pick up a sling bag. These are pretty much the beginner items you're going to be using in Escape from Tarkov. Where did that M rig go? It's right here. These 3 items are essentially what you're going to be wearing in your first couple of raids. You have some level of protection, and you have the ability to carry loot in and out of raids. Alright, so now we're also going to clean up our stash and get a little bit of money because we have spent some. We're going to back out here. Now, the important thing to note is that the selling order when you come out with loot is going to be Therapist, Skier, and then Mechanic. So we're going to get some money here. We're going to check Therapist if there's anything we want to sell here. I personally recommend keeping all of these items because you will eventually use them. Meds at the early game level are almost always important because you will use them. Food and water you will need as well. That's something I forgot to mention, is that health and food and water is persistent throughout raids. For example, if you die in a raid, your PMC will be half health before the next raid, and you will need to heal and fix those issues before, or feed your PMC. So there's nothing I want to sell to Therapist, but eventually we'll get items that we will sell to Therapist. We're going to go to Skier now and see if there's anything we want to sell to Skier. Skier mostly buys rigs, backpacks, and weapon parts. That's what you're going to be selling to Skier. And then for Mechanic, we're going to be selling a couple things here. Mechanic is pretty much the dump all for the rest of the stuff. Anything that the Therapist and Skier do not buy, you're going to sell to Mechanic. So we're going to get rid of these Makarovs because Makarovs are absolutely trash. 9x18. I don't like using 9x18. This is kind of personal preference, but I would recommend not using these. We're going to dump these. 9x19, however, PST is a decent round, and we'll talk about rounds and the ammo chart soon here really quick. But we're going to go back here and we're going to do something else. We're going to take this AK, and you notice that this AK is using BP rounds. We're going to open up this AK and explain the weapon screen. So this AKS is pretty much stock. This is the base of base attachments you see here at the bottom. There's a whole bunch of different buttons up here that are pretty much self-explanatory. We're not going to go into presets right now, but we are going to talk about the stat screen for weapons here. So the durability is pretty much the durability of the weapon. If it reaches 0, it's broken and you need to repair it. honestly, that very rarely happens. You don't really have to worry too much about durability. Weapon mastery is how you handle the weapon, depending on how much you've used it, how many kills you've gotten with it, and you'll get weapon mastery the more you use that weapon. Ergonomics is your handling of the weapon. Is the weapon clunky? Is it heavy? That's going to affect how it handles. Are you going to be able to whip this weapon around very fast? Is it going to drain more stamina when you aim down sights because it's so heavy? Ergonomics is essentially how it handles. Accuracy, I've never really noticed the accuracy stat really making a difference. Maybe it has. Maybe someone else has gone into more of a data deep dive on that stat, but I have not. Sighting range is effectively how far that weapon is accurate up to. Vertical recoil, very self-explanatory. Same with horizontal recoil. Muzzle velocity is how fast that round is going to travel out of the gun. So 735 meters per second in this case. And then, of course, you have self-explanatory information down here. Now, at the bottom here, this is weapon modding. This is where weapon modding really is a rabbit chase. It's a huge rabbit hole we don't really want to go down right now. The main thing we're going to do here, though, in this screen is notice that each part of the gun is on its own slot, and what we're trying to do right now is take the mag out. Now, there's two ways you can do that. You can right click and click unload, or you can go into the weapon screen as I did here and pull the mag out manually. Now, the reason we're pulling that mag out is because this mag in particular is once again loaded with BP, and BP is a solid 5.45 round. Don't worry about the ammunition types right now. We'll go into more depth about which rounds you should be using later in the video. So we're going to sell this AKS because personally, I don't like using AKSs. You might want to keep this, but I'm going to sell it for the extra money. And that's pretty much how or what order you would go through selling stuff. It's therapist, then skier, and then mechanic. So looking at our character now, we've bought our rig. This is what we're going to be using as far as our tactical rig, our backpack, and our body armor. Now, a couple hotkeys that I just used right there. Alt left click is going to equip the item, where control click is going to put it in your bag. Now, for example, let's take this grok, for example. If I want to equip this grok really fast from from whatever I'm looting or my stash to my person, I'm going to Alt left click, and that will equip it. Now, I can control left click it to take it off, and that'll put it in the stash. Now, notice if I control click this pistol, it's going to put it in my backpack, not on my person. So these are some hotkeys that you should learn, because as you play more Tarkov, you'll notice that, let's say we have all these items to loot off of a body. The last thing I want to do is be click dragging everything into my bag that I want to loot, right? Because the more time you spend out in the open trying to loot, the higher your chances are of getting killed. So if I want to quickly loot all this, I'm going to hold control and click, 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 right? Now, let's say I wanted to equip, I found this pistol on someone and I want to equip it. Once again, that's Alt left click. And then put it back in the bag, that's control left click. So just a couple of hotkeys that will speed things up. So now what we need to do is get ourselves a weapon. So we're going to go and look at the beginner weapons in Escape from Tarkov. There are two main weapons you're going to be using from 1 to level 5. Now I say level 5 because at level 5, you'll unlock the flea market. And once you unlock the flea market, you essentially have access to every item in the game so long as you can pay for it. The flea market is a player-run market that allows players to list items and buy items from other players. And until we reach that, we're kind of stuck with what we find and what the traders have. So the first thing we're going to do is go to Prapor. One of the most popular early game weapons is the SKS. We're going to purchase the SKS, and the rounds we're going to be using for the SKS are 7.62 by 39 PS. This is a solid 7.62 round. It's going to be pretty much the staple of what you're using as far as early game ammunition for the 7.62 rifles. Later on in the game, you're going to be hitting the BP round, 7.62 BP. And I'll have a kind of list on the screen of pretty much the rounds you should be looking out for as far as each caliber. I would say there's 4 main calibers that you're going to be using in the early to mid game. That's going to be 9x19 PST. That's the early game 9mm round. Later on, you will be using 9x19 AP 6.3. You're going to be using 5.45 rounds, which are the AK rounds. You're going to be using 5.45. Any round that starts with a B is worth picking up. The lowest round that you're going to be wanting to pick up for 545 is going to be the PP round. From the PP round, the next best round I think is the BP round, and then I think it goes to BT and BS. In that order, those are the rounds that are useful. Now, the reason I'm saying that certain rounds are useful and certain rounds are not is because these rounds carry penetration to go through body armor. A lot of the rounds in Escape from Tarkov don't have penetration, and therefore when you meet someone or a scav that has armor on, you will do very little damage to them because your round will not be able to defeat the armor. Now, aside from the 545 round, we already touched on the 7.62 rounds. You're going to be looking for 7.62 PS, which you can just buy from Prapper. And out in the field, you're going to be looking for 7.62 BP, which is the top round for the 7.62 rifles. And then the final round that I think you should be looking for and sticking to in the early to mid game is 5.56. Now, 5.56 recently got buffed. Mainly what you're looking for as far as 5.56 round is anything that ends in A1. There's M855A1 and M856A1, and the best round in the game, one of the most expensive rounds for 5.56, is going to be M995. So if you ever see these out in the field, you want to take them. So there's a whole bunch of other weapons and rounds in the game. There's a whole bunch of ammo charts and stuff like that, which we'll go through and talk about later in the video, like I said before. So we finally got the AKS here, and we're going to be getting a couple rounds for it. So we're going to grab 30 PS rounds. That's about a good amount for the SKS, and we're going to talk about how to load this SKS. We're going to be going through the SKS here and examining the parts. Now, one thing specifically you can do to the SKS directly is removing the rear sight. This is only for the SKS. Some people believe that removing the rear sight on the SKS makes that front sight much more visible, and so that's something you can do. But it has an internal magazine. Later on, you can get detachable magazines up to 20 and I think 35 round detachable magazines for the SKS. But right now, the starter SKS only has an integrated magazine. This means that the SKS will be top loaded. You will not use another magazine to reload this gun. To reload this gun, you'll notice that if I take and drop my rounds on the SKS, it will not fill up the magazine. All this does when you drop a round onto a gun is load the chamber. So right there, we've just loaded the chamber. There's one in the chamber, and we now have 29 rounds remaining. We're going to go into the gun and take the internal magazine out. Now, with normal magazines, like the detachable 6L20s, you can just drop the ammo in there and put it in the gun. But for the SKS and other internal magazines, like the Mosin or shotguns, you will need to take the internal magazine out of the gun to load it out of raid, and then put the magazine back in. So now this is loaded with 10 rounds in the mag, 1 in the chamber. We're good to go with that. The only other beginner gun I would recommend using, and we'll buy one right now just to show, is the MP5KN. We don't have any dollars. To buy dollars, you're going to have to buy them right here. We'll buy, what, $500? We'll buy an MP5. This is just for show. You don't have to use the MP5 right now, but it is a solid SMG, high rate of fire. You're mainly looking to hit people in the face with this, or, like I said before, arms and legs. So we're going to buy a couple of mags here. We'll buy 3-ish mags. And then the cool thing about the standard account is that you will have the best 9x19 round at the start, which is PST. You can also buy this from Mechanic if you ever run out. I'll show you right here, 9x19 PST GZH. So we're going to load up this MP5 as well, just to show you the comparison. So we'll take these mags down here, and we will take the rounds, and we're going to load up each magazine. Now, something you want to note is that this is already using a 20-round magazine. Let's say for the sake of argument, we don't want to use it. Just like before, we're either going to click and drag this 20-rounder out, or we're just going to right-click, unload, and load our own 30-round mag in here. So that's how you would kit the MP5K if you were going to use it as well. For this raid, first raid, we're going to be using our SKS. Okie dokie. I know we went over a ton of information here. The next thing we're going to do here is load our meds. Now, my beginner med recommendation is going to be a bandage in the pockets, and then the AI2, splint, and painkillers in your alpha. Now, the logic behind this is that when you're in a firefight, the immediate action med is going to be your bandage. You're not really going to sit in the open and splint yourself. Sometimes you will need to use painkillers, but to be frank, when you're starting an Escape from Tarkov, you will die a lot. That's just part of the learning experience. You are going to take a lot of damage, a lot of deaths, and a lot of losses early on. And to mitigate the amount of money lost and to prevent ourselves from losing all these meds every time we go in, we're going to keep them in our alpha container. For example, the alternative is to put these in our hotbar right now and to hotkey them and have them ready to go. However, if I died, I would lose all these meds and I would have to replace them. So I keep them in my alpha container until I need to use them. If I get into a raid and I need to heal, I'll then pull the AI2 out, hotkey it, and start using it actively. But I don't want to have passive money lost every time I die unnecessarily. So this is my typical med layout here, and that's pretty much what I'm going to be bringing into a raid. Alright, so we have the explanation for all of the gear that we're using. I've taught you how to load the SKS and the MP5K depending on what you're wanting to bring in at the start. I guess a couple things here before we start is we can put our MBSS in our MBSS. Stacking is a definite great way to save space. You can also do this with your Tritons. For example, these Tritons are empty. If we want to save space, we can put our water and food in this Triton. Stash space is going to be quite a large problem, especially with a standard edition. However, later on, we are going to be able to update our stash through the hideout. So let's go talk about the hideout now. The hideout is essentially your base. It's brand new to 0.12 in Escape from Tarkov. You're going to be leveling up the hideout. It's going to cost money to complete and do things. We're going to do a couple of these just to show you what upgrading your hideout looks like. It's going to cost money. It's going to have different requirements. For example, the water collector requires us to have level 1 security and all these building parts. The initial basics, though, however, are only going to require money. So we're just not going to blow all of our money on the hideout right now, but just showing you what the hideout is. Later on, you can get some really cool things throughout the hideout, like a Bitcoin farmer, which is essentially passive money generation. You can also craft certain items in the hideout. You can unlock the Scav case, which is an RNG kind of loot box-ish. You put in money and they bring you put in-game money and they'll bring you rare items. So cool stuff like that. It's just fun, and I think it's a great addition. It's a new way to progress in Escape from Tarkov. So it's extremely useful, and I highly recommend keeping an eye on what you need in your hideout and trying to collect those items. I think now, before we get into a raid, is a great time to explain the ammo chart. So we're going to pull up the ammo chart on the screen here, and this is, once again, this is constant for 0.12. If we get patched or if there's an update or a hotfix, these values are likely to change. But we're going to be talking about these ammo values here now. So if we look at the ammo chart, you'll notice that it's a very simple graph with damage on the bottom and with class armor on the top. There's a certain line in the middle called the chest HP marker, and the reason why that is so important is because, as we learned before when we were looking at our character health, chest HP is at 80. If your chest HP, or your thorax to be more specific, ever gets zeroed out via weapon damage, you die instantly. So it's a threshold to show what rounds will one-shot you. So we're going to look at the M80 round in particular. It doesn't really matter what caliber it is right now. We're just using the M80 as a point of reference. The M80 round has the penetration to go through everything under Class 5 armor, as you can see, because it's located in between Class 4 and Class 5. It will defeat Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, and Class 4 armor. It also does 80 damage. It's right on the 80 damage line. That means that if a player or a scav is wearing anything less than Class 5 armor and you hit them in the thorax with an M80 round, they will instantly die. The same thing goes for the round next to it, which is the 7N1. The 7N1 will also one-shot. It even does more than 80 damage in the thorax. Now, another point of reference is the M62, which is above the M80. The M62 has more penetration. It will defeat Class 5 armor. However, it does not do 80 damage, which means that if you shoot someone with Class 5 armor in the thorax, they'll be left alive with like 3 or 4 HP. It won't one-shot them. And just based off that, you can kind of read the rest of the chart. Certain bullets and certain slugs or calibers are going to penetrate armor really well, but have less damage. And then some rounds do a ton of damage, but they have no penetration, which means you need to be going for exposed parts of the body, like the legs or the arms. One thing to note about high penetration rounds that don't do 80 damage, for example, let's look at the SNB round, which is the second highest penetration round. You'll notice it can defeat Class 6 armor, but it does not do 80 damage. What high penetration weapons and calibers are good for are headshots. This means if someone's wearing a level 6 helmet, if you hit him in the head with SMB, it's pretty much a guaranteed kill because the head does not have 80 health, it has 35 health, I believe. So that's also an important threshold. Is just imagine a 35 head HP dashed line on the screen, because that's very important as well. That's if you're looking for headshots, that's the round that you can use. So that's explaining this chart, and just using that kind of reference points, you're able to decipher all this information, because I know it's a ton of information. A lot of you guys are probably gonna have to stop the video, rewatch the video, but yeah, I'm just trying to put all this out here. I'll leave links to this chart as well. This was an awesome resource I found on the Reddit. I did not make this, just to make that explicitly clear, so props to the maker. So we've explained pretty much everything we need to right now, early game. We're going to go now do Escape from Tarkov and talk about the difference between PMCs and Scavs. This is pretty much one of the last things we're going to do before we hop into a raid. Scavs are a separate faction. PMCs are their own faction. There's two types of PMCs, and there's two types of Scavs. There's AI Scavs, artificial intelligence Scavs, and player Scavs. PMCs, there's bears and USECs. So as far as AI Scavs, if you the difference between playing as a Scav and a PMC is that you're allied with the AI Scav faction. This means that AI Scavs will not engage you. Whereas if you play as a PMC, pretty much everyone else is hostile. If you play as a Scav, the only other people that will shoot you are PMCs and other player Scavs if they choose to engage you. Now, one thing to note is that if a Scav kills another Scav, if a player Scav kills another Scav, whether it's you or an AI Scav, all the Scavs in the vicinity will turn hostile and try to engage you as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Another difference between the Scavs and PMCs is that Scavs start in the raid later than PMCs. Scavs will come into a raid later. This means that you're not fresh into a raid. Other players are going to be dispersed across the map. A ton of stuff could have gone down before you Scav in. PMCs, on the other hand, will start each raid at the very start of the raid, top of the timer, and the raid will be fresh, all the loot will be there, and all players will start in their spawn locations. So you have a better idea of where people are on the map. The last difference between Scavs and PMCs, or I guess the second to last difference, is that PMCs have that container that we talked about before, the alpha, beta, gamma, or epsilon container. You can take containers in as a PMC, and therefore when you die as a PMC, you can take certain items out. As a Scav, you don't have that luxury. You don't have a container. What you have on a Scav, you lose if you die. There's no way to get it back. And then, of course, the final difference between Scavs and PMCs is that Scavs have auto-generated loot. I highly recommend as a new player that you play as a Scav because you get free loot, essentially, if you're able to extract. You're able to constantly get a chance to get rare items in your inventory because each Scav is auto-generated from a random amount of a loot pool, whereas the PMC is very explicitly what you take in. One thing is that the Scav and the PMC stats and quests are completely different. There's no quest for Scavs, but you cannot complete quests for your PMC as a Scav. That means that the 5 Scav kills we have to get on custom, they have to be when we're playing the PMC. They can't be done when we're playing as a Scav. However, because we have to find 5 Salewas and 2 MP133 shotguns for that quest that we saw earlier, we can find those items as a Scav, bring them out, and turn them in. Holy crap, this has been a long video, but we're chewing through all of it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is click next on our PMC. The reason why I want to focus on my PMC and level my PMC at the start is to unlock the flea market at level 5, get our quest progression done, and get all those things unlocked. The Scav is great if you're learning the maps and you want to get some free loot or you're running behind on money. It's a great, very low consequence way of learning maps, learning the game, and getting some free loot. Moving into the PMC, when we're looking at the maps here, level 1 to 5, and pretty much most of the early game, I highly recommend you just learn customs. When you're choosing a map, you're going to be able to pick what time zone you have. Most of the time, it's a 12-hour difference. For example, this is 2 p.m., right? 1400, and this is 2 a.m. Night is very dark. I would not recommend going in on night raids as a beginner player because you're going to get lost. You don't know the map yet. And speaking of maps, we're going to pull up a customs map right here on the screen and explain customs very briefly. So looking at the customs map, you'll notice that customs is very linear. It's a very flat map. You're going left to right or right to left. PMCs will spawn either west of the river or east of the river, north being Dorms VX on this picture. If you spawn on the west side of the map, you have to make it to the east side of the map to extract. For example, if you spawn near Crossroads or anywhere pretty much west of the river, you're going to be extracting at your primary extract at ZB 1011. This means you have to go all the way across the map and get to that extract zone. If you spawn on the east side of the map, you have to go westbound. If you spawn on the east side of the river, you have to get to Crossroads or Trailer Park to extract. Now, there are alternate extracts. Alternate extracts are secondary extracts that have a chance of being active. They're not always there. They're usually denoted by something very visible. For example, if you spawn west of the river, your alternate extracts, aside from ZB 1011, which is always open, are going to be ZB 1012, which has a light on it when it's active, and Old Gas Station, which I believe has a green flare when it's active. If you spawn on the east side of the map and you're moving west for extract, you have two alternate extracts. They're going to be Smuggler's Boat, which is shown by a active campfire, or RUAF checkpoint, which has a light at the top of the gate. So that's how you know alternate extracts are open. Now, there is one alternate extract that is available to everyone on the map, and that's Dorm VX. That's a car at the north gate. If you get there and you want to use that extract, you need to bring 7,500 rubles, I believe, unless they changed it, and also wait there for about 40 seconds. Once that car leaves, after someone's paid him, that car's gone. No one else can use Dorms V extract, and that is also not always there. So if the car's there, it's active. If the car's not at that gate, that extract is not available. All the other blue extracts that you see on this map are scav extracts. So when you're playing as a scav, you will be in this raid looking for a random set. You'll hit 00 in-game to see your extracts, and you'll be moving to one of these to try to get out once you're done looting or you want to leave the raid. So I've explained the map as far as the extracts. Now, a couple of points of interest are going to be the dorms in the north. It's a high PvP area. There's loot there. There's crates there. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. The scav boss can spawn there, which is a really beefy boss with updated like aimbot stuff that can kill you really fast. It's a high danger area. Same thing with Big Red on the west. It's a high quest area, so there's a lot of quests going on there. A lot of players transiting that area, trying to get their quest items, PvP, and look for stuff. These two areas, as well as the new gas station on the east, are all very high loot, high danger areas. So just know that going in, and accepting that kind of danger when you're in those areas. But that's pretty much everything I want to talk about as far as map-wise. Our goal right now for our quests, we don't have to go anywhere in the map specifically. We just have to get our items and get our kills. So we're going to go into the daylight raid, which is 2 p.m., excuse me. We're not going to bring a map. We use the external maps or the external guides, which are going to be listed in the comments and description. And we're also going to be avoiding the offline mode for this raid. What this essentially does is you can play raids offline, which means that you won't lose the gear you take in. You can set certain conditions like random weather conditions, random time. You can turn on the bots so that you can fight against the bots in practice. This is a great tool for beginners to learn the maps and learn mechanics outside of like losing their stuff. You're not on an online raid. Nothing you do in here really matters. You can enable the bosses. You can have Scav War on. You can have a whole bunch of stuff queued here. And this is a great way to learn maps without actually going in and losing stuff. Now this is the insurance screen. This is also only available to PMCs. You can't insure stuff as a scav. And how insurance works is depending on who you insure with, either prepper or therapist. When you die and you drop your insured items, if no one else on the map picks it up and takes it out of the raid, in about 24 hours, once again, depending on who you pick to insure your stuff, you'll get those items back, and you'll have a limited amount of time to get that stuff from your mail or your messages. So it's a way to kind of save the equipment that you lose in a raid. So I just insure everything just because it's a great way to save money and to get certain items back, especially at the early game and early stages of Tarkov. When you're beginning, this is all baby loot. Very few other players are going to take your stuff, which means more than likely you're going to get this stuff back. And it's pretty cheap to insure in the beginning. Of course, as you get higher value gear, it's going to increase the value of your insurance. But at the beginning, I think it's totally worth the investment. One thing I almost forgot, I almost made a new mistake, is we're only having the 10 rounds in the gun and the 1 round in the chamber. I want to make sure I bring those other rounds that I brought. So that's always something you want to make sure that you have is your gun, your armor, your bags, your meds, your nades, and your ammo. We're not going to bring nades in, but we need to make sure we have our ammo. So always make sure you have those things. Very important. Almost messed up there. And once again, we're going to be doing customs to ensure that we get our shotguns and our quest done. So that's pretty much everything you need to know for your first couple of raids from level 1 to 5. I know this was a long video. You might have had to split it up into little bits, but I really enjoy teaching people, and I hate seeing in my comments, like, what is Tarkov? Like, I want to teach you guys. I want to show you guys why I love this game so much. It's just so hardcore. It's got tactics in it because people are actually scared of dying. There's nothing like stalking a player and hunting another player. It's just a fantastic game, and I thought that, you know, the channel kind of needed an explanation as to what Escape from Tarkov was, and I'll probably have to make a shorter video because this video is pretty long, just to explain that to my viewers, but I want to share my love of this game with you guys and help you guys get into this game. So I hope you did enjoy this first episode. The next episode is going to be our actual first raid, just because I realized this is going on pretty long. So this is everything you need to know before your first couple of raids. I hope you did enjoy this video. I'll leave all links once again in the description. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more of these series. I hope you did enjoy today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and a special thanks to my channel members. If you want to support the channel and get up to 20% off my whole game store, check out that blue join button down below. Speaking of game store, you can buy my favorite games and official merch at karmakut.com, so check it out. Looking for more content to watch? Try our last video here or sub on the right for future uploads. Finally, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.